Welcome to the Kentucky History Channel, where we strive to bring you all the Kentucky history content you want and you deserve. Kentucky is a part of all of us, and we plan on covering all the history we can, from Pike County to Fulton County, from Louisville to Harlan. Here on our YouTube channel, you can find many videos dedicated to different events, people, governors, and places in Kentucky. There's something for everybody. While you're here, if you like the channel, hit the subscribe button and the notification button so you get notified anytime new Kentucky history is available. And if you want to support the channel, we have a Patreon page as well, or patreon.com/kyhistorypod. You've probably heard about Daniel Boone, but what about the rest of the frontiersmen who came to Kentucky and settled? That's what we want to bring to the Kentucky History Channel. The stories of the untold, the stories of those forgotten. One thing to expect on our channel is great Kentucky content. Some stories that you've never heard of. The Night Riders, who began in western Kentucky. Bloody Monday, the riots in Louisville. The assassination of Governor Goebel, the only governor ever assassinated in the United States. Stories from all over Kentucky, stories that are unforgettable once you've heard them. You can find out who counties in Kentucky are named after and how your county got started. From beginning to end, we plan to document every county in Kentucky, all 120. Reach out to us on all of our social media platforms. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And also leave a comment on one of our YouTube videos. You can also check out our podcast episodes. You can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and many more. Welcome back to the Kentucky History Podcast. I'm your host, Jameson Cable, and with me is David Kirkpatrick, and we're here to tell you some more great Kentucky history. David, how you doing?
Doing great. You?
Doing pretty good. I always want to talk about the weather and, all that, but then I'm like, this is pre-recorded. It's not going to make any sense. But it's April.
Yes.
Oh, it's May.
I got some more outside. Yeah. Oh, that's right. It is about a few days.
It is May 2nd. But yeah, we finally broke through the cold winter, man. It's been, or the cold spring, I guess. Really, it's just been trouble getting through. But you're probably listening to this and it's in the middle of August or September, and you're like, man, give me some cool fall days. So
about the time when people are missing the frost. Yeah.
Yeah. But we got a good topic. We're going to talk about, I'm going to say the Forgotten Boone in many ways, but we're going to talk about Squire Boone.
Right.
One of the frontiersmen that is in many ways looked over, basically because he's the younger brother of Daniel. We've talked about James Harrod, Daniel Boone, Simon Kenton, and we're probably and Benjamin Logan as well. So we've got a lot under our belt. But right. Squire Boone, he deserves an episode of his own. He's had many accomplishments, but I guess that's a good start.
Yeah, and it's a big shadow to step out of. And like you say, I think that's his main problem. If your last name isn't Boone, Squire probably fares a little better in the history books. And really, he's more successful than Daniel in a lot of ways. But, again, we've talked about it before. Daniel Boone gets the first real, true Kentucky biography, and it launches his career, and everyone else kind of falls in behind.
Yeah, very true. His older brother is Daniel Boone, so and everybody knows about Daniel Boone, so it's very easy to get that foreshadowing. You're very right. If it was Squire or something else, then maybe we're talking a bit more about him. But we're not. It's just the way it is, the way history has unfolded, I guess. But that's why we're doing an episode about Squire Boone, so people will, get on board with those Squire.
That's right.
So the technical stuff. He was his dad was Squire Senior, so I guess we should say Squire Boone Jr. in many ways. Born in October 5th, 1744, a, a month shy of a decade after his brother Daniel. So that gives you some perspective there. He's pretty much 10 years younger than him. Um,
Yeah.
and his dad, Squire, his mother, Sarah, Morgan Boone. And he was born in Berks County, Pennsylvania. Um, he was the 10th of 11 children. And I wonder, that's a lot of kids, of course, but I'm wondering why old Squire waited so long to get a junior in there or get a second. That's kind of the traditional thing is you give
Yeah.
your kid your name, but
Yeah, it is odd. You think that would be one of the first few names that you would hand out, but later in life, or usually the more children you have, the greater the risk for complications of pregnancy and that kind of thing. So juniors are usually first or second born.
yeah, yeah, and but anyway, I guess he rolled the dice, and waited till the end. Which again, 10 to 11 kids or 11 kids is it's just a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, yeah. And this is not history in any way. It's just my personal opinion. But my theory is, we'll talk about this more in a second, but the Boones have kind of a falling out with the Quaker Church. There's a lot of focus on humility and modesty and that sort of thing, in the Quaker faith. So the buildings are very plain. The worship services are not elaborate. And you wonder if maybe early on Squire felt, well, if I'm naming someone after myself, if I'm, having a junior, maybe that's a violation of the faith. But as they move away from that core, maybe it was more acceptable. Don't know, but just a thought.
I think you're 100% correct. That sounds legit. I think we put it down put it down as fact if we can.
That's right. We'll roll with it anyway.
So, like you said, the problem with the Quakers or the Quaker faith was a big kind of thorn in Squire Senior. There's a bunch of other little issues which I believe we probably talked about with in the Daniel Boone episode or episodes, I should say. But he takes his family when Squire is about 5 and moves to the Yadkin Valley in North Carolina. Which if again, if you're thinking Squire's 5, Daniel's about 15.
Right.
And Squire's taught many trades, woodcraft, so forth, and other things. But he's also a gunsmith for a while. With his cousin Samuel. So learn a lot of trades, but who's he looking up to the whole time?
Right. Hopefully Daniel. Yeah. Well, it is even sent back to Pennsylvania. I mean, you talk about having a number of kids too. Usually you're going to invest the education and the training and stuff in the older children. But they're willing to send you from the Yadkin back to be trained as a gunsmith, which is a pretty lucrative trade and a trade that it's going to have plenty of job security. And so you wonder the relationship between Squire, junior and senior, that they've invested that much in him. And he obviously is literate, perhaps more so than Boone was too, but perhaps more so than some of the other children because of his second profession.
Yeah, yeah. And so, well, you think about investment, and I mean, even nowadays, our kids, we invest quite a bit in them in different ways, obviously, than they did back then. But having their kid doing a profession that was going to be beneficial to survival in many ways,
Right.
in that time, as far as a gunsmith was very important. And if you had a gunsmith, which would then play on to his role in the frontier, having that training, I'm sure, helped him tremendously as far as survival and so forth. Yeah, pretty handy guy. I don't know. I don't think O'Daniel went to gunsmith school.
Yeah.
Now, we probably already talked about this, but was Daniel? What order was he? The child. What order did he fall in out of the 11?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know that.
I would
he was not the oldest. Was he?
Yeah, I would think he was probably. I would think he was 2 or 3, top 5 for sure.
Yeah. I'm gonna go with third, but I'll have to check that. But yeah.
Okay. Well, you check that, and I'll.
The only reason I know is at least the only reason it's at least third is, remember, one of the problems with the church in Pennsylvania is there
The
are
older
children that
brother.
marry outside the faith. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Daniel is at least a little bit down the line, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I think that maybe Squire's seeing the handwriting on the wall too, because now you don't just move because of the issue with the church, and that's a big deal in a lot of biographies. But the squeeze for land, which is hard to imagine when you consider how much they had and how many people lived here.
Yeah.
But still, the rising prices in land, the fact that some of these land claims that had laid dormant that belonged to rich people on the East Coast or belonged to people back across the Atlantic, they're starting to parcel those out and sell those for profit. And so maybe if you're Squire, the idea of farming is not as bright and sunshiny as it once was, because you have so many children, you can't divide your land. So you have to find other trades. And it's interesting because it's that very concern that ends up driving them westward.
Yeah.
That promise
Yeah.
of land.
Yeah, and I hesitate to say the lucrative business of farming doesn't seem as
Yeah.
good, but but yeah. So and moving on a little further down, I guess, in his life here, in 1765, he's married to Jane Van Cleve,
Hmm.
um, and they built him a cabin on Bear Creek, which is um, the Yadkin River, um,
Right.
in the woods and so forth. Um, Excuse me. They live there and they have 5 children. The youngest is Morgan Boone, which was one of the first white children born in Kentucky. So, um,
Right.
pretty good. And to clarify, they didn't have all those children right there in North Carolina.
Yeah.
It took some time. Um, but anyway, as we said before, Squire is basically like many young siblings. He looks up to his older brother. Um, and his older brother is running wild in the woods,
Right.
a lot. uh, so of course, he kind of wants to join in with his older brother. I'm sure there was many times of begging to say, "Hey, can I go with you? Can I go with you? Um, can I go on this, you know, hunting trip or excursion or so forth?" Um, and eventually,
Right.
older brother gives in. So
Yeah. Right around 67 or 68, they begin making a lot of those trips together. And I guess it's really the first time we see that, because where Boone is older, Boone has some French and Indian War service. He's with Braddock. I say Boone, I should say Daniel. Daniel's older.
yeah,
And he's got all these experiences already accumulated that his younger brother just doesn't have. So while you're learning a trade somewhere, as you said, Daniel's rambling through the backwoods. So you wonder what kind of catch-up game uh, he ends up playing, because Squire's got a lot to learn, and Boone really, I think, takes him under his wing during the late 60s and the very early 70s.
yeah, yeah, and I mean that's kind of the whole, I guess, build up to what Squire learns. I mean, learns a lot of stuff from his brother, who is probably one of the best people to learn it from,
Yeah.
in that sense. So they go to Florida, have a few long trips to Florida, which I don't believe they enjoyed as much. Florida was not as lucrative as
Yeah.
Kentucky.
Orlando looked a lot different then than it does today.
Yeah, true. Disney World and Mickey Mouse. He wasn't that stuff wasn't down there. So,
Right. Right.
uh, but they go down to Florida. Then they come back though and go on some more hunts, and then they start going into Kentucky, or what is Kentucky County, and we're talking about the long hunts. Um, they spend plenty of time, I think, in the winter of '67 on the left fork of what is now known as Middle Creek in what is now Floyd County, which is a big misconception. A lot of people get confused about Daniel Boone when his first time was in Kentucky, but it was not. He came through Pike and all that, Pike County and all that stuff. But side note, this we're talking about Squire again. But anyway, they go to Floyd County, Kentucky, 68. John Finley and came around with where the Boone brothers lived, and they had kind of served. I think Boone and Finley had served in the Braddock War, and
Right.
pretty much was saying, "Hey guys, let's go to this bluegrass region. Let's go to to good old Kentucky, and that's what they did. Right?
Yeah. Squire moves with him, and really, I think is seeking work as much as Boone is when 1775 rolls around, and Henderson, makes his offer. Uh, so Boone needs to recruit some guys to help cut the wilderness road that he can trust, and who other than his brother, who, as you said, has made it about as far south as you can go already, who's already made several ventures into Kentucky. You need
Yeah.
someone who knows how to survive in the woods. So,
Why not? Why not, little brother? Tag along, right?
right.
Do you have a little brother by chance?
No, I am the little brother.
Oh, okay, all
Like,
right.
insert joke here. But I'm the youngest of three, so I think
Oh, sweet.
sometimes they
Okay.
probably left me in the woods. But that's
Well, I'm the middle. I'm the middle of three brothers.
oh,
So I have plenty of younger brother stories that you know. The best one, I'll digress here, is when we told him about our other younger brother, and he was like, "What?" I was like, "Oh, mom and dad didn't tell you about the other younger brother?" And we said he was bouncing on the bed, and he jumped up, and the fan cut his head off.
oh,
And he was like, "What?" But we eventually
he
told him.
bought into it.
Yeah, which I mean, we were probably, me and my older brother. I mean, I was probably 10 or 11, and my older brother would have been, 13. My younger brother would have been, 7. So, so
It's about the right
pretty
age for
good
that.
little age gap. Easy to, gullible little brother. But
Yep.
yeah, anyway, anyway. So Daniel, he and Squire go on plenty of, I mean, plenty of excursions. I can't think of how many probably right off that they go on, but eventually they do all move west. You talked about uh, Henderson, which that's probably getting a little bit ahead,
Oh,
because he we can go through a few of the little excursions, with John Stewart. Um, they go west then, and John Stewart is eventually, he's the one who dies and is found in Rockcastle, or his
yeah.
bones are found in Rockcastle like many years later. Um, but yeah, that happens. And again, it's one of those things, and we'll bring this up multiple times when you're talking about. It's hard for me even to talk about this stuff because I keep wanting to say, well, Daniel Boone, was doing this, but that's the center of all the stories is Daniel Boone. It just Squire's there too, you know. And so you know, I want to be like, well, Daniel Boone was here, but Squire was there too. He was on the trip
Right.
for most of the time. Um, it's just we just know more about Daniel. It's hard not to plug him into the story and so forth. So um, I'll try to. I'm trying my best to not bring up Daniel as much, but it's hard.
Oh, I understand that. In
uh,
Squire's early life, a lot of it's a mystery too. Like, what causes him to go into the ministry? And Squire becomes Baptist preacher early on, and he carries that profession with him into Kentucky in a time when a lot of people, may give up their professions back east and go to farming or developing the land. Squire hangs on to that, and I think with some of those early ramblings with Daniel that you mentioned, I think that was probably a comfort to them. Um, and
yeah,
I've heard Squire was a huge fan of Gulliver's Travels too, and that probably the first fiction book carried into Kentucky. So
yeah, yeah. Well, on one of these trips, though, they do go searching for Daniel, and with the John Stewart one, Squire and I think Neely go and search for Daniel Boone. Um, what is at the time Kentucky County, and his brother had been taken prisoner by some Native Americans, but uh, Daniel or Squire and Neely are able to find him. I don't think they help. They don't help get him away from the. I think it's one of those that Boone sneaks away from the natives or that, but they are able to eventually find him. And then Stewart, is never found until his bones are found. So,
yeah,
uh, so there's that's that. Moving on a little further down to the winter of 69 and 70. Um, Daniel and Squire hunted in eastern Kentucky together, or the hills of eastern Kentucky again. They kind of go back and forth, though. These are just hunting parties as now, making, getting the pelts and so forth. There's times that, they had so many pelts they didn't know what to do and all that. But we keep on going down a little further as things kind of happen. We bring this up, of course. Daniel Boone's son is killed on like 71, 73 or something around there. But Squire was with Daniel Boone again when they cut through the Wilderness Trail. And that's when we're catching back up to Henderson and what we mentioned earlier, that whole scenario. And again, you have Boone, who's more of the, I don't want to say the business end of it. You don't want to be like Squire was just tagging along, but in many ways, that's what was happening. Squire came with him. He wasn't as involved that we know of with Henderson
Right.
and kind of the legislative, or how would you put it? Business end of it, I guess. That's what, like I said, I don't know. What would you say?
Yeah, with the colony's development, Squire is still part of the muscle.
Yeah.
You're talking trees and stuff. Boone is charting the trail. Boone is communicating with Henderson by letter. Daniel is communicating with Henderson by letter, and Squire is one of the men because he doesn't seem to have found his voice yet as an individual. And again, you're serving in the shadow of Daniel Boone, and in some ways that's to be expected because Daniel was the guy hired by Henderson. But when you are that experienced in woodcraft and being out, you would expect there to be some semblance or some example of that in Squire's behavior. And we don't get that until a little bit later.
Yeah. So like we said there, well, Squire, they go to Kentucky. Squire goes back to get his family, and after Boonesboro has been built and so forth. So around 76. But like you said before, Squire Boone is one of the first, or is the first, Baptist minister to perform a marriage in Kentucky, which is, very notable. And he marries Samuel Henderson, which is the brother of Colonel Henderson, and to Elizabeth Callaway, who is the daughter of Colonel Callaway, or Richard Callaway, I believe, right?
Right.
And later he preached the first sermon in Louisville. So
Yeah.
some notable things. And he does, like you said, carries that faith throughout. Is there any good biographies that you know of Squire?
Not a lot. You tend to get, again, footnotes in Boone biography, in Daniel Boone biographies. And I've searched for them, even to the point of finding, basic facts about, was he a slave owner, that sort of thing. I've spoken with biographers about that. And I've not come across any good concrete sources. Rowan County, North Carolina, or the Rowan, as they say down there, I guess, the tax records are an option. But as far as just picking out who he is, we don't get a lot of that. But of course, at this time, like you mentioned Louisville, Squire seems much more willing to hang around places that appear to be developing more quickly. And
Yes.
I guess in a sense, his older brother Daniel is, you're defending the head of the Wilderness Road, right? You want Boonesboro to survive. You're being paid to do that. But Squire, he tries Louisville. He ends up living for about a year in 1777 in Harrodsburg. And so he's slowly branching out away from Daniel, and he's trying ventures that Daniel probably wouldn't. Again, you being a man of the cloth, that's a profession that, there are circuit riders and that kind of thing. But if there's going to be a settlement at the Falls of the Ohio, they're going to need a minister. And so, he really moves into his own, I think, in the late 70s. And that's when we see him more as a person rather than, Daniel's shadow.
Yeah. And that's probably a pretty good comparison or contrast between Daniel and Squire. Is Daniel always had that people are getting close, I'm leaving.
Yeah.
As opposed to Squire in many cases kind of stayed back and wasn't as antisocial, I guess, as as his older brother.
Yeah. And he seems to put out feelers too. To your point, when Boone moves on, Boone moves on. When Daniel left North Carolina, Daniel comes to Kentucky. When Daniel, we talked about it in the video on Boonesboro. When Daniel leaves Boonesboro, he comes back and starts another little settlement, a little ways off. When he leaves Kentucky later in life, he is gone for good. And if you look at Squire, Squire comes with Daniel. They start out at Boonesboro. He ends up in Harrodsburg for a year. He comes back to Boonesboro. He ends up in Louisville for a little bit. He ends up, back at Boonesboro for a little bit. And to the point that he's there in 1781 when the siege happens. So Squire is really, putting out feelers and testing things and always circling back, though, to that safe spot.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when Daniel moved on, he moved on.
He's out. Yep. Yeah. And that's Squire deserves it. He may be our favorite Boone by the end of this.
That's right. I've got a friend who lives in Shelby County who might be biased because of that, but he says Squire is the smarter of the two Boones because he's more successful and he's never captured, so.
Yeah. Well, like you said earlier, he settled or was there in Harrodsburg. Just to give, I guess, a tale, because I feel like we need to give as many little tales as we can because we all know all the tales about Daniel Boone. But one day, him and a friend was out harvesting corn, and they were attacked by 3 Native Americans. One of his Squire's friend was killed pretty much right off the bat because he was shot. So a big hand-to-hand battle kind of ensues. Between Squire and the other two Native Americans, because I guess he was able to take care of one with a shot. But then Squire killed one of them with his sword, and the last one ran off. The battle gave Squire a big scar, which he kind of boasted about, which was a badge of honor in many ways. Again, two weeks later, he's attacked again, and he was shot, and he broke one of his ribs. So there's the excursions, there's the incidents or battles that Squire was in as well. You just don't know about him.
Right, wounded 5 times. Like I think you may have pointed out earlier. I mean, my goodness, when the enemy, of course, the Indians use less powder in order to conserve it. So a lot of times their shots didn't have the range or the punch that settlers did. But still, to be with a musket ball or to be at close range or to have the person beside you shot, there's a little bit of the Boone luck running in the family, I think. That's
a good way of putting it. But yeah, so like he gets he was there whenever the siege of Boonesboro. He went out to do the negotiation, and the big fight ensued. Again, though, about Simon Kenton running out, grabbing Boone, running back in. Squire's there the whole time. He's involved, but as far as what he did exactly, I don't know. We don't know.
Not to slam Daniel, but again, you almost feel like Squire doesn't get mentioned because he does it on his own, right? I mean, he defends himself on his own, whereas Boone has to be Daniel has to be rescued. And so I think, and this has happened more over the centuries, the thing that makes Boone popular is that Boone, at least the Fess Parker version of Boone, kind of bumbles his way through a lot of this, by accident and just goodwill. And there were some indications in history that Daniel was lucky or he had some help. But Squire tends to kind of make it through on his own. He's part of the community, but you don't have all the stories of people having to rescue him and that kind of thing that you do with Daniel. So he fades into the background.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's maybe that holds him up a little more. Gives him a bit more credibility. He didn't really need all this extra help. He's doing it on his own. Sometimes little brothers turn out okay.
Yeah, that's right. Not always.
We're going to stop right here with our discussion about Squire Boone, the Forgotten Boone, and we're going to continue next week. Again, thank you to David for coming on and adding to our discussion, and thank you again for listening, and we'll see you next time. Welcome to the Kentucky History Channel, where we strive to bring you all the Kentucky history content you want and you deserve. Kentucky is a part of all of us, and we plan on covering all the history we can, from Pike County to Fulton County, from Louisville to Harlan. Here on our YouTube channel, you can find many videos dedicated to different events, people, governors, and places in Kentucky. There's something for everybody. While you're here, if you like the channel, hit the subscribe button and the notification button so you get notified anytime new Kentucky history is available. And if you want to support the channel, we have a Patreon page as well, or patreon.com/kyhistorypod. You've probably heard about Daniel Boone, but what about the rest of the frontiersmen who came to Kentucky and settled? That's what we want to bring to the Kentucky History Channel. The stories of the untold, the stories of those forgotten. One thing to expect on our channel is great Kentucky content. Some stories that you've never heard of. The Night Riders, who began in western Kentucky. Bloody Monday, the riots in Louisville. The assassination of Governor Goebel, the only governor ever assassinated in the United States. Stories from all over Kentucky, stories that are unforgettable once you've heard them. You can find out who counties in Kentucky are named after and how your county got started. From beginning to end, we plan to document every county in Kentucky, all 120. Reach out to us on all of our social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And also leave a comment on one of our YouTube videos. You can also check out our podcast episodes. You can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and many more. We're always seeking to find more Kentucky history so we can bring it to you, the viewers, the listeners. We want all the stories and all the events from Kentucky's great history to be told and shared everywhere.